Who are millionaires? Especially billionaires. These are people who create jobs, who increase production and improve goods and services. If they move from New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles to Texas or Florida, for example, then their offices, their factories, their service centers move with them. That means in the cities they're fleeing from, the number of jobs is rapidly decreasing, and the residents of those cities are losing well-paid jobs. Either they end up sweeping streets or dormitories, or they just go on meager unemployment programs or some other ones that exist in their states. They're not starving, but for example, they have nothing to pay their mortgage with. Usually they also don't have enough to pay off their car loans, and they can't afford to take their kids on vacation in the summer, so to speak. They just can't manage it. Moreover, those who used to pay taxes to the country and the city end up being turned into parasites, not because they wanted it. Yes, sucking out of the budget what others contribute. Whose fault is it? Well, let's see. If people are moving en masse from New York to Florida, maybe that means something. Maybe it says something about the laws or the city of New York. Or is there a mass exodus from California to Texas? Maybe something that's being done in California is making these active, talented people, these business organizers, want to leave. When people move from, say, Mexico or Honduras to the United States by the millions, we understand that Mexico is somehow worse for them than the United States, that the United States is better, and here people are also leaving. But it's not the same poor and uneducated people like from Venezuela, Colombia, or even Mexico, but the opposite. The wealthiest ones, and at the same time productive and smart, not necessarily the most educated, but usually educated. Like from Russia or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, it's the exodus of smart, resourceful, and enterprising people. People always look for where life is better for them, and they go there.
Any state that doesn't have a state income tax will be seen as a competitor. And I would say that Texas is probably our main competitor, but one area where we surpass all the states is our quality of life, the convenience, and the beauty of the Palm Beach area.
This is what's being built in Florida to attract these very wealthy people who not only bring money into the state but also create hundreds and thousands of jobs. This is what's being built for refugees to attract them. At the same time, they're saying how lucky we are that the mayor of New York is such an idiot. New York is far from finished and remains the country's and likely the world's financial center. But as Mikhail Gorbachev used to say, the process has begun.
In 2025, the city recorded 313 new lease agreements over $100 per square foot, which is much higher than in 2024. And companies like John Pierpont Morgan, they also just opened a $3 billion 60-story global headquarters right on the street where I am now. But even so, John Pierpont Morgan is now hiring more people in Texas than in New York. So there is a shift happening.
As I said, it's not just the wealthy people themselves who are moving. They're bringing jobs with them. And employees either follow the jobs or lose their regular income. And New York is a very expensive city. In addition, New York has traditionally had a lot of wealthy people of Jewish descent. They arrived at the beginning of the 20th century, settled down, and established many of the most successful companies and banks in the world for the first time in centuries. No one asked them about their nationality or their faith, and no one hindered the development of their natural Jewish ingenuity. Many of these wealthy Jews voted for Mamdani, apparently believing that he was something like a Muslim counterpart to the persecuted Jews of the world. And then came surprises, little surprises.
The new mayor of New York, the Muslim Zoran Mamdani, did something quite controversial. He revoked the executive order of former Mayor Eric Adams, which established the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism. Mamdani claims that using the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition could restrict freedom of speech or even block legitimate criticism of Israel. Some leaders of New York's Jewish community, which numbers about 1 million people, are expressing concern, saying that this move sends the wrong signal at a time when hate crimes are on the rise. Israel's foreign ministry called it anti-Semitic fuel on a fire.
What liberal Jews fought for, as the saying goes, is what they ended up with. A mayor has been elected in New York, an anti-Semite. I think most people haven't realized it yet, but if he keeps going like this, they will, and it'll hit them like a sledgehammer to the forehead, or on the forehead. I'm not sure exactly. For example, under previous mayors, the city of New York didn't have the right. Well, in Uchili, in New York, besides the mayor's office, there are also a huge number of institutions and companies that belong to the city or work with the city. They did not have the right to join the boycott against Israeli products. It's odd for a government institution to join a political boycott, but never mind. There was a special order that you can't, so to speak, boycott Israeli products, its athletes, its art, its performers. If people want to boycott, they will. If they don't, they won't. It's none of your business. The new mayor lifted this ban, meaning, as he said, go ahead, attack.
Well, now he has lifted the restrictions on boycott, divestment, and sanctions activities, which could have a more significant impact. This means that city institutions no longer have explicit obstacles to participating in the actions. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and the boycott of Israeli groups making decisions about divestment that align with this movement. What does this mean for fighting anti-Semitism? Could it lead to new attempts to isolate and demonize Israel?
Of course, and unfortunately, I think this is exactly where both the left and also part of what I call the new right actually come together. Unfortunately, this is such an anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and on the right, a purely American model, which is extremely dangerous, considering not only the geopolitical strategy that America has always consistently pursued with Israel as its ally. Also, the United States as a Christian nation has always recognized Israel's status before the Lord in Atlanta based on theological foundations. And that's why I believe this is just another trick. What? Although Mamdani claims that he will continue his attempts to incite hatred, in reality, this is an anti-Israeli, pro-Palestinian move that fully aligns with his progressive communist anti-Israeli goals.
A communist, an anti-Semite, hates the free market, or maybe just pretends to hate it, is ready to take away anything from those who created and earned it and redistribute it, well, almost equally. I didn't say almost fairly, right, because any division of stolen goods can't be fair. And if you don't give us what doesn't belong to us, well, we just want it. So what you have will, let's say, kill you for it. Well, before that, we'll try to do something else, but if not, we'll kill you. A kind, wise, and good man, a true father of the city. Mamdani, who does he remind us of, Mullah or Ayatollah? And of course, most importantly, where do we get the money for his feverish nonsense?
So, other questions for Danny's mom. He promised to tax wealthy citizens to raise funds for free bus rides, childcare, and other social benefits. How do you think wealthy people in New York will react, and how might this affect families? Will it benefit them or harm them?
Yes, it harms them, and I think this shows Jerry, Danny's mom, doesn't really live in the real world. Communism has always failed wherever tried. This directly opposes free market capitalism, private property interests, and the biblical values that form America's foundation and conservative principles. I think that many New Yorkers will respond by simply moving, and that's why Governor DeSantis here in Florida, my home state, is preparing for this impact. And if New Yorkers come to Florida, we just hope they don't bring their politics and their votes for the Democrats with them.
The striking thing about the Democrat exodus is that when they arrive in a new place, they vote for liberalism again, and if it wins again, they run away to another place where it doesn't exist, and then vote for the same thing there again. Well, Florida Governor DeSantis has said many times, kind of jokingly, that those who bring their progressive views with them please stay somewhere else or go to other states and don't ruin, please don't ruin life here. Floridian Mamdani was appointed as the head of the Housing Policy Department. There it's called a bit differently, something like Housing Policy Advocate, but it's the head of the city's Housing Policy Department. A communist woman who demands to take away all housing from the owners. Can you imagine something like that?
Mayor Mamdani just appointed Siweaver as the new tenant rights advocate for the city. The New York Post reports that 7 years ago, Weaver called home ownership, or rather described home ownership as an expression of white supremacy, and even called for the confiscation of private property. So what does this mean for New Yorkers? Should we be concerned about this kind of thinking at City Hall?
Of course, and hopefully there will be other laws that the New York legislature will not allow some of these outrageous measures to be implemented. And isn't this really inflammatory towards minorities? To assume that private property is only for white people, and this takes us back to the pre-Civil War slavery mentality, which assumes that only white people can own private property. But again, it's a biblical value that a worker is worthy of his wages, private property for a person regardless of their skin color, because we are all one race under God. Private property is important, and hopefully these measures, well, Mamdani and his appointees will try to implement them, will be further restricted by New York. That's why I believe the governors and state legislature elections will be very important.
Jaina, the last question for you is, do you think there are attempts being made now, or will there be attempts to challenge this in court? I'm reading messages.
I hope so, and I hope that many oversight bodies and conservative groups will find all the legal ways. Democrats always do this, even with good, reasonable, constitutional, and legal conservative policies. Therefore, things that violate citizens' rights and encroach on our property rights, which the Constitution preserves and protects, absolutely must be challenged and must prevail.
That is, everything that Mamdani and his people propose goes against the United States Constitution. But they don't care at all. The main thing is to throw a match into a puddle of gasoline that they themselves poured. This young lady, well, she's about 37 years old if I'm not mistaken, shares the views of Mao Zedong and Pol Pot.
It will mean that families, especially white families, but also some families of color who are also homeowners, will have a completely different relationship to property than what we have now.
Property owners, especially white ones, will lose their property. Well, that's just great, right? So what's the reaction to a show like Rubens, a well-known journalist and commentator, and generally, so to speak, a young guy, but very respected in the world of journalism?
People who chose an Islamist, socialist, communist, or jihadist who harms their own people on housing, this is that woman, enjoy.
I think that's the reality. For centuries, we really treated property as an individual good, not a collective one, and now we're moving towards seeing it as a collective good and toward a model of shared justice.
Just to be clear, the property isn't yours, it's public, and we're going to take everything from you, and it will become common property. Yeah, it used to be yours, now it's ours. Well, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, North Korea, Cuba, who else?
So this lady is the tenant's lawyer, Mamdani, now Baya. You're in New York. I don't know if you knew, but the bookshelf behind you is now a public library. Congratulations.
That's exactly what everyone says.
Everyone who was part of this cast says that, it's impossible to get a liberal arts education and not think that way and not talk like that. So basically, I like how she allowed that. There are also people of color among the kulaks. And they'll have to go, they'll have to stand against the firing squad wall. It's a rare moment of honesty from one of these people. Well, it's just ridiculous, it's just ridiculous. And it's not surprising. It's like you said, it's shocking, but not surprising. They all think that way, but I'm really encouraged to see a lot of pushback against it. It seems to me that for a long time, you couldn't say the fundamental truth that anti-white racism is racism, and that's how it feels now. In 2020, there wouldn't have been any pushback against it because everyone was saying it, probably. Back then, she said it most often, and now there's this understanding. I think there's been a real shift in the culture. Actually, no, you can't say disgusting things about white people, actually, no. You're not allowed to just act like they're the enemy, and you can't take their property. And I think that's a very healthy moment because these people who run everything are now kind of being chased down the street and made to cry.
I confirm what the previous speaker said. The Marxist Mamdanievskaya was recently crying. Just take a look.
According to the New York Post, tenant advocate Zorana Mamdani Seaweaver, the same progressive and privileged lady we just showed, burst into tears when she was asked about her hypocritical comments regarding gentrification. Because her parents actually live in a $1.4 million house. That's what liberal tears are. You just sold a bunch of mugs.
That's the whole point of liberalism. I've discussed this for years and enjoy saying I told you so. Liberalism really just means screw you, Dad. And the fact that it's a girl, this girl is already 37 years old, it's this woman holding a political office. Now she's being questioned by the media. I thought we loved transparency. I thought we loved accountability. She's simply being asked about this irony that her parents are exactly the people she fiercely calls to be deprived of their property. She's being asked and she starts to cry. Yeah, that's exactly what it's all about. Dude, these are really emotionally and intellectually unstable people. They have very serious problems, and for some reason, the euphemisms make it even more irritating. Like that phrase you heard from her, she says, "We will change your relationship with property just like I'm going to." And it's like, hey, what's with that shirt? Now it's mine, give it to me.
Exactly. You have something that I really want, but I can't earn it myself. And then I'll take it from you. Because I'm bursting with envy, I can't breathe, and I hate you for being able to earn it while I couldn't. For example, I hate my parents, like in her case, or brothers or neighbors. I envy and hate them. This is what European and American-style liberalism looks like in our version.
Not so brilliant after all. Zoran Mamdani is facing backlash from New York voters today, just a week after taking office, and his constituents already feel completely betrayed. On January 4th, just 3 days after Mamdani was sworn in as the 112th mayor of New York, promising all those free things, New York's transit had a completely different opinion. Subway and bus fares across the city have officially increased, prices are higher, and now the fare has been raised to $3.
One of Mamdani's promises was to lower the cost of city transportation or even make it completely free. But just 4 days after the election, the fare became more expensive. Well, things just don't work out that perfectly, you know.
A socialist who promised this and that for free takes office, and literally just a few days later, transportation costs go up. A New York resident took to social media to complain. Mamdani promised us free rides, but all we got was a fare increase. Another wrote, "The mayor promised us free rides, and we were deceived." To be fair, Mamdani wasn't actually the reason for this fare increase. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board, a state agency controlled by Governor Kathy Hochul, approved the fare increase back in September 2025, several months before Mamdani took office. We're now learning the mayor doesn't even control the fare. How about that?
So he promised to lower the fare or even make it free, but it turns out that as mayor, he has nothing to do with it, nothing at all. He can't raise it or lower it. It's not his jurisdiction, not his responsibility at all. Then why did he make that promise? So that idiots would vote for him. Why else?
But that didn't stop Mamdani from making that promise. But the question is, how are you going to make it free?
We will fund the revenue that would otherwise have been generated from fares, and that's what we will do in partnership with Albany. I made 2 proposals. Raise taxes on New York's top 1% to bring in $4 billion and increase the corporate tax rate to New Jersey's level to generate $5 billion.
You're throwing around numbers that seem strange to me. By the way, yes, I'll find someone later and show you who calculated these numbers. He will raise the tax on the top 1% of wealthy people in New York, and this will bring in $4 billion here, $5 billion there, a total of $9 billion, which, first of all, none of these numbers have been verified or confirmed. And secondly, it's specifically this top 1% of the wealthiest. And they leave. They have absolutely no problem moving, while poor people do have a problem moving. Where to work, how to find a job, how to buy an apartment. Here, though, they just leave, get what they need, set things up, and that's it. Goodbye. And then you either sell this place or just lock it up because you don't really need it. You have another house somewhere else. And if they leave, then who is going to be the one to pay those $9 or however many billions and so on. So they'll find someone else to tax, just not them. They've already left. Those who work with you will be taxed, so the ones who are working will end up paying for those who aren't working. That's what communist justice is. Ours and yours is ours too, thank you.
So, in case you didn't know, the numbers he's giving are actually outrageously incorrect. It turns out this guy actually doesn't understand taxes or math at all. And of course, the New York press corps is too ideologically biased to even notice. Mamdani fundamentally doesn't understand, or at least at that time didn't understand, how progressive tax rates actually work. So, as you just heard, Mamdani promised to introduce a 2% income tax for millionaires, which he said would bring in $4 billion. But there's one catastrophic problem. New York uses a progressive tax rate system for income tax with 4 current brackets. So your income is divided into segments, and each segment is taxed at progressively higher rates. It starts with a tax rate of 3, then it goes up to 3.73, and finally to 3.9. For every dollar over an income of $50,000, Danny's mom's plan would add a 5th tax bracket of 6 for every dollar earned over $1 million. This is the harsh reality. His calculations, which you just heard, where he gets that figure of $4 billion, are based on the assumption that the entire amount of $1 million is taxed. He doesn't realize that a person who earns exactly $1,001 will end up paying only 6 cents more. Because that's how marginal tax rates work. You only pay tax on the portion of income you earn above a certain threshold. It's not a tax on the entire $1 million. I mean, this guy literally got elected on a scam, or in his case, just on tax and mathematical illiteracy. And New Yorkers are learning this the hard way, that the mathematical laws of money always ultimately prevail. Reality always wins in the end, and that's why this is so important. Mamdani's entire election campaign was built on one grand promise: to make every bus in New York absolutely free. You heard him yourself.
Maybe. Mamdani thinks that $3 for a bus ride is basically nothing. It's practically free, but it's $3 there and $3 back. Let's say you go to work 25 days a month, that's $150 just for the bus. I understand there are passes, monthly ones are cheaper. I understand you can ride without paying, but $3 for a bus ride isn't free. Come on, don't call $3 tickets free. There's another little problem. Mamdani has a lot of little problems, but there's one more that will really make you guys boil. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell and send this video to your liberal friends. They'll find it really interesting, but not very pleasant. And also, my adventure story, In Search of You, Peruchki. You can download it for free. The links are in the description. Much has been written about it, mostly positive. Many political figures read it. America was similar 10 to 12 years ago when it was first published. That means... Yes, so the link will be below. And also, for anyone who wants to become a sponsor of the channel, I would be very grateful. It's $4 a month. And now, as they say, back to Mamdani, to New York. And yes, not just to him, but also to his bright present.
Here you go. First, Mamdani promises to tax what he called, and I quote, the whiter neighborhoods. And now, an official from his administration was caught saying that especially white families will have to have a different relationship to property than the one they have now. And now, some good news from Washington. Harmit Dillon, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Trump administration. She issued a very public warning to Mamdani and his administration.
Being white doesn't mean you have fewer rights here. Everyone has equal rights, and we won't tolerate New York violating federal law. They should be warned. They are under close scrutiny. And we will intervene immediately and do whatever is necessary to protect all citizens and taxpayers and the residents of New York who are there illegally.
And the irony in all of this is that the housing crisis in New York is not the result of insufficient regulation, but rather the consequence of too much regulation. From 2015 to 2024, New York has implemented at least 6 major housing initiatives, including rent freezes in 2015, 2016, and 2020. Universal right to legal assistance for tenants in eviction cases, the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, the COVID eviction moratorium, and just cause eviction laws. Each measure was introduced to protect tenants and limit rent increases. And as a result, rental prices skyrocketed. The median rent in Manhattan has increased by 25% since 2015, reaching $6,000. 5% of all stabilized rental apartments in the city are now sitting vacant and empty because landlords can't afford to make repairs that meet the regulations. Due to rent control restrictions, the citywide apartment vacancy rate is 1.4%, meaning only 1 out of every 100 apartments is available for rent. Out of 154,000 public school students in New York, yes, you heard that right, 154,000 are classified as homeless. Progressive housing policy hasn't solved the crisis. It has only made it much worse, as it always does. And Mamdani's answer is just more of the same. Rent freezes, nationalizing buildings, and attacking property owners, especially white ones. The good news is that more New Yorkers than ever have already been through this. They're either leaving, the refugee crisis we call the leftist refugee crisis has already begun, or they're staying and fighting back. To be continued.
We talked about those who are fleeing New York, but now let's talk about those who are running to New York. There are some of those as well. The city of socialism began to take shape in New York during the time of Mayor de Blasio, the first socialist mayor, from 2014 on. I think it was 2021, and de Blasio was preparing the city to become a magnet for illegals, the poor, the destitute, the homeless, and the unemployed. From 2022 to 2024, the number of homeless people in New York doubled, and people from other cities rushed in, hoping to live off the taxpayers. There's a position called state comptroller. The comptroller believes that there are 158,000 homeless people in New York State, with 93,000 of them going to the city itself, and 7,000 to the towns near New York and the metropolis. In 2022, 45,000 people lived and were fed in city shelters, but by 2024, that number had grown to 89,000 people. So, gentlemen, it's simply doubled. And according to all the data, these are illegal immigrants that the Democratic Party brought to New York and other cities. Naturally, they placed them in private hotels, using them as shelters and paying hotel, not shelter rates. Food, medical care, clothing, education, entertainment. They call the drugs by a different name, ketamine. I think they bring it to them, but it's still drugs. In Mamdani, he also added a ban on dispersing so-called tent camps. They began appearing everywhere in New York, just like in Los Angeles. There are now about 70,000 people here, so camps have grown in New York. These small towns have large budgets that are again taken from us, then partly embezzled and partly given to them. They bring food, clothes, alcohol, and drugs. At least in Los Angeles, they bring drugs. I know for sure. I just knew a person who was, as they say, in charge of distribution, so that's how it is. The situation in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in other words, in major democratic cities, is that workers, laborers, and even employers are being replaced by welfare recipients who mostly have no education, don't speak English, and have no idea what made America great, meaning lifting people out of poverty, hunger, and disease. So what happened that makes everyone want to come here? Something must have happened, right? New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. These are perfect breeding grounds for socialism. Take away and redistribute, mainly because most of the population depends on government handouts. They rely on them and will vote, support, and do anything. Go to demonstrations, throw stones, whatever it takes. and for those who give it to them so that, God forbid, they don't stop giving what, in their view, keeps them afloat and prevents them from starving. We have brought 15 to 20 million people here, most of whom need support or they'll starve. So the legend that's being implanted in their minds is that if another party comes to power, bad uncles and aunts, then they'll die of hunger in the gutters, and no one will be able to help them, no one will lend a hand, and so on. Now New York is starting to realize the absurdity of those ideas that were given to you, that were shoved down your throat. And it seems to me this is just the very beginning of individual awakenings. Real understanding hasn't come yet. And if that's how it's going to be, then I'm actually very glad that Mamdani was elected mayor so that he can show by his own example how dishonest and deceitful the Democrats in the United States truly are. That would be great, for example, since everyone is watching New York, and everyone is watching even the smaller ones. San Francisco has been completely messed up, but hardly anyone really talks about it, while everyone will be talking about New York all the time. Everyone is interested in this, so I'll try to keep you updated. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.